friends, and welcome to the Average Gal's Guide to Anxiety. In today's video, I thought I'd talk about what I do when I'm in a public place and I have an anxiety attack. So when I was younger, one of my biggest triggers for anxiety attacks was school, church, and weirdly enough, the movie theaters. So what I would do usually in those situations, if I couldn't avoid being in it, I would usually try to take myself out of the situation if I could and walk around, take some deep breaths, and then just work through those feelings and help bring my mind back to reality and kind of refocus my thoughts. At school, usually I couldn't take myself out of the situation because I was stuck in class, and I couldn't really go to the bathroom all the time if I was having an anxiety attack. So, what I would do is just try to take some really deep breaths at my desk and just work through the situation and bring myself back to the reality of the moment, so to speak. It was a rough process, especially through middle school and high school. But when I was on medication during those periods, it would help me a lot to refocus my thoughts during those attacks. And so what I would do is I would just kind of breathe through things, just do a little bit of grounding, like on my desk or just touching things and smelling things and trying to focus on what my teacher was saying. And usually I was able to bring myself through that moment. It would take about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 20 sometimes. And it wasn't always perfect. Sometimes I would have a little nauseous moment in the bathroom. But that was usually some of the hardest moments. And weirdly enough, movie theaters were a huge trigger for me. So whenever my family and I would go to the movies when I was growing up, I would have a very hard time. I would usually just stick to water and try to drink some of that and then try to like breathe through it and calm myself down and just focus on the movie. And depending on the movie, I usually within the first 20 minutes was able to calm down. There were a few times where I just had to take myself out of the theater and go sit out in the like lobby area because it would be a little too hard to focus. And for the most part, I've gotten past that. Um, Recently, I had a really hard time when we went to see the latest Spider-Man movie back in December. But I was usually able to breathe through those moments and just kind of focus on enjoying the movie and the story and enjoying the time with my husband. In church, usually if I have an anxiety attack during Sunday morning services, I would try to breathe through it in the aisle, or not in the aisle, but in the pew where I was sitting. But if I couldn't take myself out of the anxiety attack within about 20 minutes and it just wouldn't go away, then I would usually go back to the green room where the worship band meets, or I would take myself out into the lobby area outside of the auditorium. I usually hated doing that because I hate drawing attention to myself, especially when I'm going through an anxiety attack, but it was usually better off for me to just take myself out of the room and out of the situation and just kind of calm down and walk around, look at things, take deep breaths, go to the bathroom and splash some cold water, get a drink of water, and just look outside and kind of ground myself in the moment. Um, but there were some really hard times during that because there were certain subjects that would trigger my anxiety a lot. Like I'm getting anxious just thinking about it. Because my pastor was very old school Southern Baptist, which was fine, and he was a very kind, sweet man that I learned a lot from. But he would, whenever he would talk about Revelation and end times stuff, I would usually get anxious about that. And I've done a lot better with that in the past few years. But that was definitely a hard time because I had a hard time bringing my mind out of those thoughts and freaking out about it. But it definitely a helpful tip if you're in those moments is to just refocus your brain into that moment and bring your mind back to, okay, yeah, this freaks me out. My brain doesn't want to focus on this, but just reminding yourself, especially if you're a Christian and it's hard in church, just reminding yourself that no matter what happens, God is in control. And so that really helps me. And it helps me at work as well because I have the flexibility and I have a lot of alone time where I can just listen to worship music if I'm having a really hard day. Um, and we have like a little area outside our building where I can just take a break from my work and take a walk outside if the weather's nice. Usually I do pretty well in restaurants. Every once in a while, and especially within the last year, in the last couple of years with COVID and everything, I'll have anxiety hit me all of a sudden if the noise and the crowd is a little too much for me. Every once in a while, I'll go to the bathroom and just kind of breathe through it. Um, there was an instance on a little trip down to Texas a few months ago where I did have to just go outside and let it out, so to speak. But usually in a restaurant, just breathing, grounding yourself in the moment, and trying to block out the noise and the crowd around you, that can help. And then finding restaurants that are quieter, more intimate, and with a little more space around you, that can help a lot too. Or just have food brought into you. Just order from DoorDash or Grubhub. I like to do that a lot, which drives my husband nuts sometimes, but sometimes it's nicer to just eat at home in the quiet. But if you do want to go out, or if you're wanting to go out with friends or family, or to celebrate something, then sometimes it's nice to be able to just breathe through it. Um, and one thing I also want to mention is not having any shame if the anxiety gets the best of you. Um, I know over the years I've gotten a lot better about not getting sick, but I would always beat myself up if my anxiety got so bad that I would get sick somewhere. It happened a lot at school, unfortunately, and it happened a few times going to the movie theater with my family. Um, but just giving yourself grace and giving yourself room to realize that you will improve. Things will not always be this bad if you just keep working at it. I'll be the first to admit that even though I've been at this for 20 years, things are not always perfect. Sometimes I will take a Xanax if things are just really bad and I can't come out of it. Especially since I started having panic attacks a few years ago. Some of those moments and some of those attacks of anxiety or panic are just too much to try to calm down from, and it can be really hard to come out of on my own. And so I don't want people to feel any shame if they need to take that. I would much rather be calm and not panicking or anxious and able to enjoy the company of the people I'm with or the experience that I'm having. Um, I know I had a hard time when we were on the last few days of our trip to Belize after our wedding. Um, being in a foreign country was a little hard when you have anxiety and you just want to be home and in a familiar space. But one thing I was proud of was just trying to breathe through it and just trying to focus on where I was and who I was with and enjoying time with my husband before we came home. Um, but I was proud of myself for still going on that trip and getting to experience that with him. One thing I always try to remind myself when I'm in a public place and I start getting anxious is this too shall pass. I've gotten through so many of these moments, and even if I don't get through it perfectly, I still got through it and I'm here today. Um, so try not to feel discouraged if you feel really panicky or anxious in a crowded space, and try not to let it affect you too much to where you're not getting to experience life or getting to go out and experience new places or restaurants or movies. Um, I want you to realize that you can do it. It's hard, it's rough, it's ugly and gross sometimes, but I hope that you realize that you're worth getting through those moments and that you can get through those moments. I've gotten through so many of them. And if you ever need anybody to talk to and I'm there, please come to me. I know how it feels. I will never judge anyone for needing to walk out of a church service or class or a movie or whatever because they're feeling anxious. So hopefully you don't feel any shame in feeling that way. And I hope that you live a happy, fulfilling life, no matter what your anxiety is trying to do to you or what it tells you in your mind. I hope this video was helpful and encouraging. Leave some tips down below of what you like to do if you're having an anxious moment out in public, and tell me what you're struggling with, and maybe I can help. Thanks for watching, and I hope you like and subscribe, and leave any comments down below of any future videos you'd like to see me do. Bye!